Another day, another dying live service, this time in the form of Splitgate. This is a first-person shooter game that has essentially portals as its main feature. And the first game garnered decently positive reception. Its player base didn't quite hold as well as it could have, but generally people were excited about this concept and seeing how it could be improved upon. So you can see right here that Splitgate 1, overall, it's got a very positive review score of 91% from, over 100,000 reviews. Pretty good. But then enters the sequel, and it is the complete opposite. You can see right here, Splitgate 2 currently has a mixed review score of 61% from over 18,000 reviews. And what people mainly cite as the core issue is the way Splitgate 2 just kind of deviates from what made Splitgate 1 so special. What people really loved about Splitgate 1. Maps don't have as many portals as they could in terms of the ability to place portals on specific walls. Those have been diminished. Then there's aspects of ranked play that people found just not really well fleshed out, and the progression system and the like. The monetization proved to be incredibly aggressive for this title, even for a free-to-play game. And there are enough qualms about this title that it ultimately very quickly deflated following its launch. In fact, you can see right here that Splitgate 1 had an all-time peak concurrent player number of over 67,000 players. Usually with a sequel, you want those numbers to increase as the franchise and the IP gains more traction, but with Splitgate 2, the all-time peak only reached over 25,000 players. It is a significantly lower player base compared to the first title, and this is something that Splitgate fans cited, with many noting how Splitgate 2 is struggling to reach a third of the numbers Splitgate 1 did in the same time frame. And one way that the CEO of the development studio behind Splitgate 2 didn't help matters is the way he came out during Summer Game Fest. You may recall this incident where the CEO came out with this hat that says, "Make FPS great again," which, it's a choice given the current political climate and the division that, what that's referencing has caused. But more than that, it's the way he came out and kind of dissed other first-person shooters and basically said, we're going to make first-person shooters great again because other first-person shooters and the current state of first-person shooters suck, basically presenting himself as the savior of first-person shooters, only to come out with a product that just didn't really live up to that. That was not polished or feature complete at launch, that ultimately was worse received than the first game that they made. And ultimately, it's a first-person shooter that really didn't prove itself to be the savior of that genre. And there are plenty of great first-person shooters out there that outdo Splitgate. Splitgate obviously does have the core feature of portals that makes it unique, but that by itself isn't enough to make a great first-person shooter game. It's everything surrounding it, the systems, the progression loop, the rewards loop, and having a fair monetization system if you're going to make it a live service, and having elements that make the gameplay shine. That's what makes ultimately for a great package that Splitgate 2 ultimately didn't turn out to be. And we're talking about a live service that launched to such poor reception and did so poorly at launch. I mean, you can see right here that the way the player base diminished was incredibly rapid. So quickly did this live service flop that it didn't take long before the folks over at 1047 Games, the development studio behind Splitgate and Splitgate 2, came out with a statement announcing that they're unlaunching the game. It has essentially gone back to beta. So it reads right here, to the Splitgate community, we believe in Splitgate 2. And by the way, this was published back in July 22nd, 2025. So it says, we believe in Splitgate 2. The game means everything to us. It's been our life for almost 10 years, starting in our dorm room, and we're more committed than ever to delivering the incredible experience you deserve. We have heard your feedback, and we agree with you. We launched too early. We had ambitious goals with Splitgate 2, and in our excitement to share it with you, we bit off more than we could chew. Basically the same old we are listening statement that rings more and more hollow the more of these we see, because the general sentiment out there is like, you should have known better at this point after myriad similar incidents of other live service titles and disastrous launches. The statement continues, we rushed certain features, made some boneheaded mistakes, and most importantly, we didn't give you the polished, portal-filled mayhem you fell in love with. So we're going back to beta. We'll be heads down until early next year, rebuilding major parts of the game to capture the spirit of what made Splitgate special. That means reworking progression from the ground up, adding more portals to our maps, simplifying monetization, refocusing on classic game modes you've been asking for, and more, which we'll share soon. So they do address the major criticisms that the community has levied against them, and they've promised that they're going to rework all of those facets. But the question is, will that be enough? Is it too little too late? Has the goodwill that's been burned too much for this game to make that kind of recovery? I guess we'll find out, but history has proven that these kinds of, unreleasing the game and relaunching them, history has shown that's usually not gone well. But anyway, the statement continues, now more than ever, we need your help. We're returning not just to our roots in what we build, but in how we build it with you. That means more playtests, more surveys, more listening, and truly being community first. Our goal is to combine the DNA of the first game with the best improvements from the second. And that's an aspect of the second game that plagued it, is the fact that they didn't build the game with the community. They didn't really play test a lot of aspects of it with the community. So, for example, they included this Battle Royale mode for Splitgate 2 that they kept as a surprise, and they released it without the community knowing, without the community feedback. And if you're going to do that, you've got to be really familiar with that genre and what makes it good. But that surprise feature ended up being less than satisfactory. People felt like it pulled resources away from the modes and the elements of Splitgate that they loved, that really mattered, which wasn't Battle Royale. And then the Battle Royale aspect itself, because they didn't get that community feedback and weren't able to execute on it on a high level, that mode ultimately it didn't end up being a fan favorite. And it felt like a distraction from what should have been the core of the game being fully fleshed out. But they say right here that moving forward with rebuilding Splitgate 2, with this overhaul that they're planning for it, that they are going to keep the community in the loop about everything. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, the statement continues, rebuilding the core experience isn't a quick fix. It's a long-term commitment. To give ourselves the time to build the Splitgate you deserve, we have made the incredibly difficult decision to reduce certain roles and shift our resources to focus on this rework. So the consequences of just the piss-poor launch of Splitgate 2, the mismanagement surrounding it, is that staff got laid off, despite the fact that it was the captain of the ship that led the ship astray. But it's the crew that ultimately suffers for it. They say here, this is heartbreaking. These are our teammates and our friends, and they helped build what we have today. They're receiving severance and job placement support, and we're committed to doing everything we can to help them through this transition. We hope to bring them back when we can. So that's really disappointing to hear, and certainly very disheartening for the people working on this game, for the team members at 1047 Games. But there's also bad news for the Splitgate community, the players of this franchise, as they announced right here that in an effort to retain as many team members as possible, we're also going to be shutting down OG Splitgate servers in a month. While we'd love to keep servers online indefinitely, it's cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past couple of years, and we have to prioritize our team. The thing is that right now, the general consensus among Splitgate fans is that Splitgate 1 is a better game than the sequel, Splitgate 2. So the fact that that game is getting sunset is not something that people are particularly happy with. Now, at the same time, it's worth noting that the player base of Splitgate 1 just really hasn't recovered. It saw a significant peak back in 2021 when this was essentially relaunched and overhauled. But then it just quickly diminished into the triple digits. And so this is a free-to-play title that is just not worth maintaining. It's not worth the hundreds of thousands of dollars, given the low player base, the low participation, the low engagement, and the low spending on its monetization elements. So it makes sense that that's happening, but it doesn't change the fact that for fans of Splitgate who prefer to play the first game right now as the second game is getting fixed, this is far from ideal. Now, they do acknowledge that, like us, we know this game means a lot to so many of you, so we're exploring the possibility of supporting offline or peer-to-peer matches. And when we return, we plan to have dedicated experience in Splitgate 2 that delivers on the promise of the original. So at the very least, they put out there the possibility that they're not just going to wipe Splitgate 1 from the face of existence. They do plan to allow it to have some kind of end-of-life existence by allowing players to host their own games and servers and stuff like that. So at least there's that. They are following the stop killing games doctrine and preserving the title in some way, shape, or form. So that's better than nothing. It's going to be in some kind of functional, playable state. which is what that movement, that initiative is asking for. So the fact that they're at least trying to support that amidst the circumstances where they cannot support this game indefinitely, given how much money they're bleeding from this, at the very least, I'll give them kudos for that. This continues. In the meantime, Splitgate 2 will remain playable and will still be shipping Chapter 3, as well as fixes and high-priority changes. We hope you'll continue to play and support the game. As always, please keep the feedback coming. We've faced a lot of dark days and have made many mistakes, but we have learned a lot and are as determined as ever to make Splitgate as great as possible. So yeah, officially, they're deeming the game to be unlaunched and basically back to beta. But I imagine that a lot of the monetization systems are still going to be there. They're not saying that player spending is disabled. So while they're labeling this game as unlaunched, it's basically as good as launched. And it's basically just trying to overhaul it as the lifespan of the game continues in the hopes that they can salvage what is currently a downwards trending live service. The message here concludes with, we have faced a lot of dark days and have made many mistakes, but we have learned a lot and are as determined as ever to make Splitgate as great as possible. Splitgate has been our life for 10 years and we wouldn't have it any other way. We've got work to do, but we aren't giving up. We love this game and we love this community too much to ever quit, so we won't. See you in the arena, Ian and Nicholas. And look, if it turns out that they can do a complete 180 on this and pull off one of the greatest comebacks, then look, that's great. That'd be an ideal scenario, but history shows that live services that have attempted to unlaunch, to go back to beta, and then relaunch, that's just not gone well. Like, you have one chance to make a really good first impression, to come back from an awful impression at launch that people have like really just given up on and banking on a relaunch saving the game. That is an incredibly steep hill to climb, as proven by previous such occurrences such as Amazon shooter Crucible. This was this PvPvE game that launched to poor critical reception. It was clear that a lot of the design elements just weren't well thought out, and the player base at launch was, it was minuscule. It was just not a live service that was financially viable. I covered this myself when it launched 5 years ago with this video titled Amazon's Crucible died so fast it unreleased and went back to beta. Exactly what happened with Splitgate 2. And ultimately, the end result was that Crucible never came back. They ultimately ended up shutting the game down before it was able to re-release. And then something similar happened with the Super Smash Bros.-like live service, Multiverses, which, when it launched initially, it was called a beta, but it was treated like a full launch, fully monetized and everything. And then it shut down so that it could be re-released at a later day, overhauled, and they moved the game to an updated version of the engine, so on and so forth. And the end result was that the relaunched game felt less feature complete than the beta, and so the player numbers suffered, and Multiverses ultimately was shut down. So time and time again, this move of unlaunching your game and then relaunching it has led to catastrophic results. I'm not saying it's impossible for Splitgate 2 to make a comeback, especially if the overhauls and the reworking of its flaws really become substantial enough that people get excited for Splitgate again, but it is just such a tough hill to climb. It is just such a tough situation to come back from. Now, separate from that statement posted on Twitter, the CEO of 1047 Games, Ian Prohl, discussed the situation with news outlet Polygon in this interview article, and he echoed a lot of similar sentiments as what that statement said, where he talked about how it was a mistake to not get the community participating more throughout the development of this game and getting their feedback before launching things, how it was a mistake to do that surprise battle royale mode instead of, focusing on the things that mattered, and, instead of hiding stuff in the community in the hopes of surprising them with something good, it would have been preferable to keep the community in the loop throughout the entire process and get their feedback across the board from start to finish. He talks about one particular egregious skin bundle that was $80. When asked about that, he just basically said, obviously that one bundle, I'm not here to make excuses. Yeah, basically saying, I totally fucked up on that one and got a little overambitious with the monetization elements of the game. Monetization being an incredibly negative aspect of this title. Again, even by free-to-play standards, people are like, some of these prices are completely unacceptable. He talked about the hat situation, the Make FPS Great Again at Summer Game Fest. That, again, not only was controversial because of all of the implications surrounding what that was referencing, but also because, if you come on stage with that kind of statement, if you come on stage with that level of confidence of all other FPSs suck, we're going to make FPSs great again, then your FPS truly better live up to that. Otherwise, you're going to look like a fool, which is how Ian ultimately ended up looking to that. He said, obviously, the vibes are worse because of the hat, but I think that if it was a 10 out of 10 feature complete game that delivered on everything the community wanted, they would be playing it right now. So he's acknowledging that he definitely didn't live up to what he presented on that stage. He continues, I've made many, many mistakes since we started this in January of 2017, and that's one of them. And I've made so many more that the world doesn't know about. So to me, it's really about just moving on, moving forward, and believing in the game. I believe in this team, and there's tons of things I would do differently, that being one of them, but I'm focused on the future. And look, it's good for people to learn from their mistakes, and hopefully that can lead to future successes. But again, it's hard for me to feel enthusiastic about Splitgate 2's future when these are the circumstances that it's currently going through, given past history. But Ian insists that he's going to put everything into relaunching Splitgate 2, saying that he's just not going to give up. He's going to keep working at this in the hopes that they can come back from this. Only time will tell. For now, though, people are just kind of making fun of this situation because of what transpired with the hat incident. After the hat situation became controversial, he says right here that I'm not here to make any apologies. I'm not here to apologize, but I am here to clarify. And then in a later post, he backtracked, changed his mind, and posted that he's making no excuses now. He is sorry for the hat incident. And so now that's just an incident that people constantly go back to and reference and make fun of, especially under the circumstances of Splitgate 2 not making FPSs great again. So you've got posts like this one: Splitgate 2 might be the first game in history to launch out of a beta and then just go back into beta less than 3 months after release. They truly made FPS great again. You've got Splitgate fans posting stuff like this: TLDR, Splitgate 2 at its best will never feel as good as Splitgate 1 at its worst, which is pretty scathing. People were also highlighting the fact that not a whole lot of folks are playing Splitgate 2, judging by how matchmaking ultimately led in players getting paired up with bots because so few players were engaging with the title, showing signs of a dying live service. And then on forums like Reddit, you've got plenty of folks bringing this up, making fun of it, and even highlighting the parallel to other live services like Multiverses, which ultimately didn't end up panning out, which ultimately ended up dying. Plenty of people also highlighting that they don't feel optimistic about this move of unlaunching and relaunching because historically that's not proven to be successful, highlighting how it didn't help Multiverses. People saying stuff like Splitgate launched good, all they needed to do was support it. Then they fairly quietly released Splitgate 2, then unlaunched it, and they think anyone's going to play it now. And other folks making the point of like, you can't just really unlaunch a game that's already been launched, especially if it's still up and listed, and if it's still a game you can play, and a game whose monetization systems are active. The game is still launched. You can label it unlaunched all they want, but it is out. And a relaunch would just ultimately mean a really big patch that they can label as a relaunch in the hopes of garnering a level of attention that a launch does. But we'll see again if that strategy works and if the overhauls are sufficient enough to bring players back, or for it to stand out amidst a very competitive and very saturated landscape and genre, where this game promised to be the greatest because all other FPSs are failing the genre, but ultimately ended up being just another live service that launched in a way that is less than ideal, in a way that ultimately ends up having people lose faith in this endeavor. But we'll see what happens. In the meantime, though, this is everything you need to know about the Splitgate 2 situation. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the live services trajectory as a whole. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.